All right. You insisted over and over again.
Recognize that if America fails, our children will live on a dark and bloody planet.
Governor, they're attacking me. I'm sure they'll presently get around to the senator said.
This is Newt Gingrich. He's a man you've probably never heard of, having resigned from politics over 20 years ago in 1999. But he's widely acknowledged as the man who turned US politics toxic and extremely polarized. His 4-year stint as Speaker of the House of Representatives is virtually legendary, both admired and reveled, sometimes by the same people. But why exactly? What made Newt Gingrich so destructive to the American political system? Well, to know Gingrich as House Speaker is to know the modern state of politics. But before we can do this, we must first understand Gingrich, the House Representative. He ran twice for Congress in 1974 and 1976, losing both times. Despite these defeats though, he continued relentlessly in his pursuit of a congressional role, and he was finally elected as a House Representative for Georgia in 1978. Already we can see a theme emerging that has followed Gingrich throughout his life: single-minded determination. This personality trait isn't a bad one, don't get me wrong, but it only escalated further as he continued to advance his career. He quickly found a niche for himself in federal committees, and in 1981 he co-founded 2 of these committees, the Congressional Military Reform Caucus and the Congressional Space Caucus. Moving forward with this strategy, he also founded the Conservative Opportunity Society in 1983. But in this new group, the seeds of Gingrich's future career were already being sown. The Conservative Opportunity Society was a coalition of younger Republican representatives who made a name for themselves by holding famously long House speeches. Now, this may not sound like a big deal, but they used the entire time to essentially attack Democratic representatives and accuse them of corruption. Again though, this may not sound game-changing at all. I mean, just look at US politics today. That's basically all it is now. But it was at the time. And to understand how, we need to take a step back and look at how members of Congress conducted themselves before Gingrich stepped onto the scene. Prior to Newt's ascent, American congressional sessions were widely known to be something of a snooze fest. Rarely you would ever encounter an impassioned speech or vicious character assassination. Instead, Congress behaved in a routine, almost inhumane bureaucratic style. We can see this in the early history of C-SPAN, a central piece in the Newt Gingrich puzzle. In 1979, C-SPAN was launched as a non-profit cable channel that broadcast the proceedings of the US House and Senate. While almost immediately gaining a reputation as a boring channel with few viewers, C-SPAN nevertheless offered a direct look into the workings of the American Congress for members of the public. Those who bothered to tune into the broadcast were unfailingly met with annoying bureaucracy and grainy images of old, charmless speakers reading off their notes. But in this quiet, unassuming non-profit TV channel, Newt Gingrich and his Conservative Opportunity Society alone saw an opportunity to seize the political narrative in favor of the GOP. And how did this happen? Well, originally it started with just Newt, taking center stage and using the channel to broadcast his own mini-political speeches. But here's the thing. It was to a mostly empty House chamber, knowing that on C-SPAN, they only had the camera on the person who was speaking, so the audience couldn't see the room. The technique was known as cam scam, because he was able to make accusations about corrupt Democrats, and when they didn't defend themselves because they weren't even there, it made them look guilty. Some might call this innovative, others might call it outrageously misleading, but whatever your political interpretation and leanings, it definitely broke the norms in a very significant way. And this was just the beginning too. He used this technique to gain much power in Congress, and perhaps officially changed politics forever in 1989, when Gingrich brought down Jim Wright, the Democratic Speaker of the House, by bringing ethical charges and accusations against him, arguing that, quote, American democracy was being ruined by the Democrats' tactics and that the GOP had to destroy the system before it could be saved. It was a rare instance of a sitting speaker being forced to step down due to ethics violations, and demonstrated the potential for political opponents to effectively target and weaken high-ranking officials through allegations of ethical misconduct. It also marked a moment where Gingrich's aggressive tactics and willingness to confront the Democratic leadership gained much attention and further solidified his role as a rising force within the Republican Party. Now, you may be asking yourself, how were political leaders on both sides of the spectrum responding to Gingrich's radical new strategy at the time? And how did members of the House and Senate react to this new approach by the wild-card Republican representative? It's an important question to ask, because Gingrich's legacy still lives on in American politics, with very real implications. As this video is being made, divided lawmakers narrowly avoided a debt ceiling crisis, an event that could have caused 8 million Americans to lose their jobs, and the stock market to lose a shocking 45% of its value. While it's terrifying to think about what could happen to our personal wealth, there are always strategies to protect them. In fact, Morgan Stanley says that you can potentially lower volatility and increase returns by mixing alternative investments like art into your portfolio. And this is where Masterworks, today's sponsor, comes in. Masterworks is the only platform taking billionaire art collectors head on and allowing normal people like us to invest in the very same art that they do. And I'm not talking about some NFT either. I mean artwork from those like Picasso, Monet, and Banksy. How it works is that Masterworks breaks these iconic paintings into SEC qualified shares, so you can invest in them without needing millions to outright buy them. With over 700,000 users signed up, Masterworks has so much demand that there's even a waitlist. But we're giving you special access. Just click the link in the description below and sign up to get started. Anyways, for the most part, Congress people just found the whole thing embarrassing. Here was this dignified and highly formal legislative branch, and it was, right before everyone's eyes, being transformed into a primitive tool for political warfare. But this embarrassment couldn't stop GOP leaders from seeing the effectiveness of Newt's approach. And in 1989, he became the House Minority Whip, in large part because of his reality TV-style antics, positioning him to be the leading figure in the Republican Party in the 1990s, just around the corner. With Gingrich's newfound position and political influence, he began to spread his strategies through the GOPAC, a Republican political training organization he was then chairman of, so others could speak like him. An example of this is the 1990 GOPAC memo titled Language, a Key Mechanism of Control. In it, you'll see the contrasting words Newt offered as a way to describe their Democrat opponents were ones such as corruption, traitors, sick, and radical. With these memos through the 90s, many junior Republican politicians learned how to battle, politically speaking, and this changed the fortune of the Republican Party. They catapulted themselves into power in the 1994 midterm elections, gaining 54 seats in the House and 8 in the Senate, making it a landslide election. This was the first time since 1952 that the Republicans controlled the House, and this shift in political power has widely been referred to as the Republican Revolution ever since. Gingrich's risky gamble on a daring new political style had paid off massively for both his party and himself. He was sworn in as Speaker of the House in 1995, the ultimate symbol of his victory over both the Democrats and his enemies within the GOP. As Speaker, Gingrich sought to increasingly tie Christian conservatism to the Republican Party, which, for better or worse depending on what you believe in, further toxified politics as well. However, Newt's time as Speaker of the House was short-lived, as ethics violations, an extramarital affair, and the worst midterm elections performance in 64 years by a party not holding the presidency proved incredibly unpopular. The day after the election, a Republican caucus ready to rebel against him prompted his resignation as Speaker, and a few weeks later, he announced his departure from the House as well. He may have been an expert in knowing how to seize power, but he was a novice at holding it. Yet, this was far from the end of his influence on American politics, though. While his role as House Speaker was short-lived, in some ways it had an even greater and longer-lasting effect on the American political landscape than his pre-election congressional strategy. Gingrich's style of partisan warfare completely revolutionized the American approach to politics. His embrace of personal insults and character attacks, dramatic speeches, and over-the-top campaign promises cemented a new form of electoral strategy. In fact, many politicians, both Republican and Democrat, have completely accepted Gingrich's strategy in their own campaign runs. Perhaps the most extreme and polarizing example of this is the 2016 presidential campaign of Donald Trump. By his own admission, Trump was clearly influenced by Newt's publicity tactics and frequently made use of insults, mockery, and hyperbolic political attacks on the campaign trail. In fact, it'll come as little surprise to you to learn that not only did Gingrich advise Trump during his 2016 run, but was even considered as a candidate for Trump's running mate. Gingrich himself has repeatedly acknowledged the similarities between Trump's political tactics and his own, even describing Trump as very impressive and someone who is going to break up the old order and insist on real change. So, for better or worse, Newt Gingrich has opened up a door in US politics that can never be closed. His approach of ruthlessly targeting his enemies, always playing to a crowd, and never backing down from unsavory political tactics have made him both an icon and an enemy for politicians, analysts, journalists, and even ordinary people. But no matter what you may think of him, his legacy and continuing influence on our whole political system is felt every single day. And that is how he broke US politics forever. Thank you for watching.